Last week, I went over the process of creating Celestial Revenants from inception to pre-showcase prototype, going over what inspired me to create the game and how the process flowed. Now, it's time for gameplay, and to discuss how the project was received and where it's going to go next. At my University Capstone Showcase of Celestial Revenants, the core gameplay loop of the project was what was received the best. That was fantastic to hear. Players loved the art, thank you Carson, and the resurrection mechanic. And even if issues abounded, it was fun to simply try to beat back an alien menace with angel towers and a personal army. Everyone seemed to agree that the bones were there and they were strong, but the muscles and skin on top was what was lacking. The tutorialization was frankly awful, and so I was forced to stand over people playing the game and explain every single step to them, as I just couldn't count on them to understand from the tutorial. I had fallen into an extremely common pitfall in game design, which was not playtesting enough. Because playtesting was primarily conducted by myself and members of my team who understood the game intimately well, we didn't notice the glaring gaps in instruction present in the game. Beyond not grasping basic mechanics well due to a lack of proper explanation, players also found the game to be extremely difficult, a problem further compounded by the fact that different tower types and their functions were not explicitly explained. I had originally intended for players to deduce how towers worked by experimenting with them through play, but that approach only works if A, everything in the game is extremely intuitive, allowing the player to quickly deduce different strengths and weaknesses over time, and or B, the player is invested enough in the game, i.e. if they had already purchased it, to want to spend that time experimenting and discovering better strategies. Seeing as this was a showcase with dozens of games vying for people's limited time, this was simply just not a smart strategy to go with. All of this meant a total rework of the tutorial was needed. I added more explanatory text to better introduce game mechanics, restricted the player's movement area within the tutorial so that they wouldn't get lost, and added more structure to introducing different tower types, allowing players to see their strengths and weaknesses in a controlled environment so they could then apply that learning to the actual game. After revamping the tutorial, I knew I had to address the severe balancing issues the game had. Not only did I only balance it based mostly off of me playing it, I also balanced it around my desire for challenge, as I'm personally the type of gamer that enjoys playing games on hard and having to fight for every inch of ground I gain. While there's nothing wrong with that, there's a reason experiences like that are typically reserved for hard modes and not the default mode the developer balances around. Not to mention that because I playtested the game so much, my skill at it naturally increased compared to someone playing it for the first time. With those three core issues laid out, A, not having spent enough time balancing, B, balancing with the wrong user experience in mind, and C, not enough first-time player playtesting done, I got to work. First, I realized I would need to more explicitly define what exactly I wanted players to experience on a wave-by-wave basis. Would it be dealing with long-range threats to the base, focusing on making sure ranged enemies don't get in range to begin chipping away at your health? Or would it more so involve having to stave off a horde of melee enemies oppressive in their sheer numbers? If I could define exactly what experience I wanted to happen on a wave-by-wave basis, I could structure those waves with more intent and design around that. This meant I would need to know exactly what function every alien enemy would serve in combat, both so I could intentionally incorporate them into wave design, and so I could know how to balance each alien stat-wise. This meant whipping out the spreadsheets, but because Google Sheets scare me, it meant whipping out the Google Doc and inserting a table of all the enemies before color-coding it. With enemy and tower roles defined and temporary stats set, I decided to go back to the Stone Age and got out a pen and paper to define the waves. Once each wave was defined, it was time to playtest, and playtest I did, over and over and over again. As I did, I could feel the game getting better each time. I would catch bugs as time went on, and also implement fixes to bugs reported in the showcase. Enemy values were adjusted and tuned until enemies felt distinct and threatening without being absolutely overwhelming. Quality of life features were implemented, and eventually it got to the point where I thought all 5 waves of level 1 were fairly balanced without significant bugs. Running concurrently with this balancing, Carson has also been hard at work to deliver more art assets for the game, mainly art to improve game feel and professionalism. All enemies now have unique death animations, those dead sprites having blue flames erupt from their corpses to more easily indicate to the player that they can be revived, and enemies have more attack animations. With bug fixes, balancing changes, an overhauled tutorial and added art, I feel that Celestial Revenants is in a much better spot, but there's one crucial element missing, and that's even more playtesting. Even though I asked my friends to playtest it, most of them were present at the showcase, meaning I'm lacking new player opinions, and that's where you come in, dear viewer. If you've ever wanted to be Sun Jin Woo, commanding your army across a massive battlefield, this game is your shot. Click the link below to play the game on itch, and I would greatly appreciate it if you left any kind of feedback in the comments or the feedback form available on the itch page. Once that feedback, along with a few additional art assets, are both implemented, I'll likely be closing in on the 1.0 release of Celestial Revenants. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.